Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a new episode of Chatting with Lady C. Hello Mum, how are you?
Well, I'm very well, honey. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
I've certainly had a very, very taxing day.
Yes,
You
what
know.
I saw, yes.
Yes. But shall we plunge in with this?
We shall.
Okay.
So for today's episode, Mum's going to be reviewing Meghan and Harry's book. So from there, it's all up for you, Mum.
Oh, thank you, honey. Thank you. Well, before I say anything, there is more ground to cover, but I would really appeal to people to let me know whether you want me to stop or continue. Okay, so shall we plunge in?
Also, you wanted to give a word about Toots.
Oh, thank you, honey. Thank you. Yes. I would like to just offer my condolences to the family of Toots Hibbert, who was Toots and the Maytals. He died. He was, to those of you who don't know, he and Bob Marley were the two superstars of reggae. He often did backing for Bob, and he died of coronavirus in Jamaica earlier this week, which is very unfortunate. And I just wanted to do a little toot to Toots. Solidarity for the brethren, as they say in Jamaica. Yeah. Who really was, such an incredible performer. And it's thanks to Toots, really, that the name reggae came into existence at all, because he did a song called Reggae, R-E-G-G-A-Y. And I remember Toots and the Maytals from when I was a child. And, because before reggae, it was ska, not ska, it was called ska. And then it graduated to being reggae. And so, just a little doffing the chapeau to Toots. So, now, thank you for reminding me, honey. Thank you. So, shall we plunge in?
Yes.
Okay. What I find really interesting about this book is the inadvertent revelations that this book does not actually reveal what Meghan and Harry and Amid Scabies and Cowring Durand want it to reveal. But it reveals a very great deal of truth to those who have the eyes to see. So my first one is, now Meghan is notoriously ambitious, and people who don't realize the full extent of her ambition might think it's all accidental. None of it is. She is extremely calculated and determined and strategic. She always wanted to be a star, and even when she was on Suits, she really wasn't a star. She was trying to become a bigger star. She was a little star, but she wasn't a big star. And on page 138, there is a rather inadvertent giveaway as to how ambitious she really has always been. It did make things awkward at the beginning, and there was certainly a little jealousy from some people when she suddenly became the jewel in the crown of the show, a Suits crew member said. But to most of us, she was still the same old Meghan, who would bring fun snacks to set to share, or hang around after filming to chat with fans outside the studio. This, of course, was once everybody knew that Meghan was everybody knew that Meghan was going out with Harry, and she underwent this massive upgrade from, you know, just an ensemble player on Suits to a household name overnight. What I find interesting in this is the admission that she would hang around after filming had taken place to chat with the fans outside of the studio. She was busy cultivating her fan base, and she was busy trying to expand that fan base. And it also shows that Meghan, which I alight upon in my book, that for huge chunks of her life she's had very little personal life at all. She's had the man she was with, who, depending on what else she was doing, she'd see a lot of or not a lot of. And then she had her career. She's, by her own admission, she's not a lady who lunches. And also, she's not somebody who has ever been sociable. She has been at times social, meaning, to those who do not understand the difference, that when it suited her to pretend to be sociable, she would be sociable. But at all other times she was only social, which means that she was strategic in where she went, who she went with, and it's always been geared towards her ultimate success. Next one. As with Kate before her, women around the world looking for style inspiration were turning to Meghan. Now, this is in the very early days of her relationship with Harry, when, if this book is to be believed, everybody was racist and everybody had it in for Meghan, and Meghan was battling racism of the highest order. But this is a complete contradiction, because of course it goes on to say the Meghan effect was in full swing. That afternoon she looked at several outfits with Jessica before settling on a burgundy, and I'm not going to repeat the rest of it because it's really too tiresome, this product placement. It ticked the right boxes, not too dressy, not too dressed down. You can actually hear Meghan, because one of her expressions is ticking the boxes. Well, this shows that there was no prejudice of any consequence, because the Meghan effect, which was a phenomenon that we all should remember if we don't remember, the Meghan phenomenon actually had a tremendous impact upon the fashion industry, because once people realized that she and Harry were an item, what she wore became of great interest to the world at large. And it just slightly conflicts that on the one hand there could have been the Meghan effect, where everybody was buying what she bought because they liked her, and on the other hand that she was battling all these terrible, terrible, terrible prejudices. So, next one. 142. We now have them playing the race card yet again. By welcoming Doria at an official royal engagement so publicly, the authors are speaking about the Invictus Games, where Doria accompanied Meghan for Meghan's first public engagement with Harry. by welcoming Doria at an official royal engagement so publicly, particularly after all the ugly racist commentary, Harry was consciously showing the world that this was what his future family would look like. Well, there was not really any great deal of racist commentary. There were hints that Meghan had an awful lot of skeletons buried in her graveyard, but these had nothing to do with colour, but with conduct, which are two entirely different things. But again, they are busy playing the race card. What do you think?
Yes, if they keep on playing it with no excuse, just people are going to get fed up about it, aren't they?
Well, I think people are mightily fed up by now. But anyway, so the next one is on page 145. There is a very interesting account, and this I have touched upon previously in a question that I was asked, but I think it's worth addressing again, because one of the most disturbing things that any pet lover can do is give up their pet voluntarily. But this is precisely what he has Meghan doing. With all the packing and changes in routine, this is when Meghan is now moving from Canada to take up residence at Nottingham Cottage in London. Her two beloved rescue pups, Bogart and Guy, were currently staying with a friend. Due to Bog's old age, Meghan was warned that flying 7 hours to the UK with him could be dangerous, and so he would have to stay behind in Canada with a close friend. Bogart was not old. It's a complete fabrication. Bogart was definitely young enough to travel. Once that reality got out, the authors and Meghan's people were at great pains to actually say, in fact, no, it wasn't Bogart's age, it's that Bogart didn't like Harry, and then you had people who didn't like Meghan saying, actually, Meghan thought that Bogart liked Harry too much. So we don't know which version is actually the truth, because you can't expect to get the truth out of people who think that it's a three-letter word spelled L-I-E. Well, it's true, isn't it? But it's a pretty slam dunk deal that Bogart's abandonment had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with his age. Which again shows that these people's version of events cannot be relied upon. It's deeply disconcerting, I would have said, that, a book can be written that is a mass of contradictions and a mass of false trails, all leading to the altar of how wonderful Meghan is. We now have another interesting revelation that shows that what I was saying in my book was actually accurate. You see, as Meghan was batting 40, she became increasingly nervous because she was not the star she wanted to be. She had achieved a modest and commendable degree of success, but she was not the huge star she wanted to be. She also understood, because she's not dumb, that she had really missed the boat in many ways, because she was never going to become a matinee idol at the age of 40 or approaching 40. If she hadn't been able to swing it at 20 or 30, 40, the likelihood was she was not going to crack that nut. So she started to thrash around looking for alternatives, and she was actually at one stage quite open about the fact that she needed to look towards her future and a life after Suits, because she quite reasonably did not bank on getting another role of that magnitude, and the idea of stepping down has no appeal to anybody, especially somebody as ambitious as Meghan. And this is what dovetailed, as I explain in my book, with her having done community service during schooling as a way of, well, as a scholastic requirement, actually. And she also by then had become friendly with the Mulroneys and the Trudeaus, and I recount in my book how she moved in on the whole lot of them, and it was really quite brilliant. I mean, Meghan, we have to give credit where it's due, is a brilliant operator, and people who denigrate her exactitude and her degree of accomplishment do themselves no favor, because you should recognize how good someone is at something, even if you don't like them. Sometimes, especially if you don't like them. Anyway, here we go. Leaving acting, something she had spent so long working to achieve, was also terrifying, as she admitted to friends. At one point, she had dreamed of moving into movies and meteor roles. As she moved into her mid-30s, I think he means beyond, but there we go, her dreams and aspirations started to change. Sorry, it's a big difference. You're not going towards, you're going away from. A voice inside her kept telling her she could be doing so much more with her platform. This is why she did the blog, because she was clever enough to see that there would need to be another platform after Suits, and that it was a platform she needed to be able to create and manage, because it had taken her 30 years to achieve the modest success she was going to achieve, and she was at the mountaintop looking down into the valley of the shadow of desertion, death, lack of acclaim, etc., etc. That was one inspiration behind the TIG. All of this is actually spot on. But she also looked up to actresses like Angelina Jolie, who had become a force of her own in the charitable space, focusing mostly on humanitarian projects that she interspersed with the more commercial ones, and funding her life with the occasional brand deal. At one point, that was Meghan's career model. There we have the admission, because it was. But then she met Harry. If she was going to have a real future and family with him, she had to give up acting altogether. This dovetails very neatly with the information I received and what I said in my book. And it is interesting that they have included this material of course, they realized that they had to include it, because if they didn't include it, they couldn't explain away a lot of what was going to come. Because what was going to come is what we are faced with now. Commercial deals, because Meghan's post-royal life has been nothing but an extension of her pre-royal life, because as her business manager said, Meghan is first and foremost a businesswoman, and she really has her eye on the bottom line. That is the dollars. The next one is a rather petty point, but the devil is in the detail. And since they have flooded us with a wealth of detail, much of which is completely unnecessary and trivial, I think when they miss out details that really should not be missed, I think it's maybe a little bit petty of me, but I'm going to indulge in pettiness. Do you think I'm allowed to indulge in a little bit of pettiness?
Yeah, you can do it.
Thank you, honey. Okay. They're speaking about Peter Townsend, who was Princess Margaret's first great love. And it's Townsend, an accomplished RAF pilot, had been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and later served both King George as an equerry and Queen Elizabeth. He also spent time as Deputy Master of the Household. Still, his honours did not change the fact that he was divorced. Princess Margaret was asked to postpone any engagement while Townsend served as an attaché in Brussels, and she later abandoned her plans to marry him. Well, the first detail is that Peter Townsend was the Deputy Master of the Household, but he then, after King George VI's death, became controller of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother's household. So they have missed the pinnacle of his career royally. I mean, who misses the pinnacle of a career royally unless through ignorance? They also go with the canned, hackneyed version of Princess Margaret abandoning Peter Townsend. But Princess Margaret told people I know that in fact she would have married Townsend, but he is effectively the one who abandoned her, because he thought, rather misguidedly, because Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, had withheld pertinent information from both Princess Margaret and Peter Townsend. And he thought that she would have to make too many sacrifices to marry him. And so he is the one who pulled the plug on the relationship. And she saved face by going along with it. But in fact, it turns out that neither of them needed to pull the plug on it, because Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was fully au fait with the fact that the government was perfectly prepared to allow Princess Margaret to retain her royal status, to have her title, to even keep on the civil list. The only thing that she would lose was her right of succession to the throne. And that's all in my book, The Untold Life of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. And it's all there in the Royal Archives and in letters and in black and white. And I'm just astonished that these people are so ignorant about something that really is very important in terms of royal love stories. On page 150, we have them saying, Harry felt guilty that she had to give up so much: her home, a rented home, a rented house. That's not much to give up. Her career, it was coming to an end in any event. To fit into his world, he was always worried about disrupting her life. Privately, he harbored fears about the road ahead. What would the press be like? Would he have to deal with prejudice from more people in his own circle and the institution? He wanted to protect Meghan, to wrap her up and shield her from all the negativity, but he knew that was impossible. He worried about her turning to him one day to say, "I love you, but I can't live like this." Meghan assured him that she was strong and ready to, quote unquote, become a team. Well, we have yet more wallowing in irrational fears and fabricated scenarios. Because, I'm not saying that there are not some people who don't like Meghan for various reasons. And I'm not saying that there's not a slim minority of people all over the world who are prejudiced. Some people are prejudiced against people who are black, people who are brown, people who are white, people who are yellow, people who are blonde, people who are brunette, people who have blue eyes, people who have brown eyes. That is just a big red herring, what they're on about. But it shows that Meghan was already playing Harry like a violin, because Harry considers himself to be a big alpha male. Oh, I'm the big strong guy, I'm going to protect the little woman. When, of course, Meghan's the alpha female, and Harry is actually the beta male, thinking he's an alpha male, but really being led around by the nose. And I'm being polite because I don't think that's what he's being led around by, although it could well be his nose as well. Also, that passage concludes with a promise that Meghan assured him that she was strong, which she is, tougher than old boots, many people say, but very superficially vulnerable. "Oh, Harry, everybody's hurting my feelings," playing him like a violin. And that she was prepared to be a team. Well, that part of the promise she has certainly fulfilled, because she is the leader of the team, and she is playing him as a very good team leader would play somebody. But you see, I think people need to understand that Meghan and Harry are giving each other something that each of them wants. Mm-hmm. He's not a complete victim. There are people who say that he is a victim of a malignant triadist, meaning that she is, according to some of her detractors, a classical narcissist with Machiavellian and sociopathic tendencies, or maybe more than tendencies. But I think people lose track of the fact that Meghan and Harry actually have an awful lot in common, and that some of their detractors may not like what they are about, but they like what they are about. And this is very important, because if you're going to get the measure of them as a couple, I think we need to get rid of the notion that Harry is an unwilling victim. I'm not saying he's not the victim of a very manipulative woman who knows how to use her feminine wiles to play him, as I've said before, like Jascha Heifetz with a violin. But the fact of the matter is that violin wants to be played by that Heifetz. So, next one. On page 155, we come to the crux of the matter. This relates to when Harry and Meghan are getting married and the consequences of their marriage. As Harry explained all of this to Meghan, they also discussed the roles she might take on as a future Duchess. Meghan, always a high achiever, hasn't that turned out to be true? Was ready and willing to jump to whatever her platform as Harry's wife afforded her. Now listen to how they put this. They are actually, in a very accurate way, not saying that Meghan was going to play ball as a royal duchess, but that Meghan was going to use the platform for her own advantage. So I don't know whether they are aware of to what extent they have exposed Meghan's rank ambition deliberately or accidentally, but it's certainly exposed. So I will repeat it because it's important. Meghan, always a high achiever, was ready and willing to jump to whatever her platform as Harry's wife afforded her. Wanting to attend engagements with Harry immediately after the announcement, she quietly began researching British charities and organizations where she would have the most impact, not where she was most needed, and not where she would serve the public good the best, but where she would have the most impact. At the beginning, it was simply her aim to understand the UK's philanthropic landscape rather than just the organizations that dealt with issues close to her heart. Like all grand opportunists, she took a step back, assessed the lie of the land, and figured out where the terrain would work best for her. This was a chance for the woman who had spent her life up to that point doing work in areas she felt passionately about to effect real change, and she saw no need to delay the process until after they'd been named husband and wife. And there we have the crux of the matter. There we have the reason why Meghan failed as a royal duchess in England, why it never suited Meghan to ever stay within the royal fold, because it wasn't about figuring out what good she could do and what contribution she could make, but how she could manipulate the situation to her advantage, and that she would be a force for change. Now, royals are not about change. They are about consolidation and service. Any change they know that is necessary needs to be dealt with slowly. That is the royal way. That is the only way that change remains secure and does not destabilize society. But Meghan had no interest in this. Meghan looked at the situation and said, right, this is what I see, and I am going to effect change. They admit it. They've got this directly from her. She intended to effect real change. And she has effected real change. She has swanned off with a royal title, interfering in party politics in America, creating havoc all around the place. And it also has to be said, very successfully, not only creating havoc, but creating commercial opportunities for her to make money. and for her and Harry to increase their profile and become ever more famous. That's not what royalty is about. That's not what royalty is supposed to be about. Page 158. We are now coming on to quite a bit of shade from Meghan to Catherine, or Kate as they call her. At the outset of her romance with Harry, Meghan had fully expected Kate to reach out and give her the lay of the land. I think they mean the lie of the land. The land lies, but you lay down. The lie of the land, it should be, on everything an outsider to the firm needed to know. But that was not how things turned out. Meghan was disappointed that she and Kate hadn't bonded over the unique position they shared, but she wasn't losing sleep over it. According to a source, Kate felt they didn't have much in common other than the fact that they lived at Kensington Palace. So there in one paragraph, we have a very dexterous maneuver. Kate is a selfish, snobbish cow who didn't welcome Meghan, who did not fulfill Meghan's expectations, and they were in this unique position together. No, they weren't. Catherine Cambridge is going to be a Queen of England. Meghan Markle may become Queen of Hollywood or Queen of the world philanthropically, but she's never going to become Queen of England, barring a disaster. So, if you cast your mind back to an earlier video and an earlier passage in this book, Catherine, after meeting Meghan, said to her, "The door is always open. Get in touch whenever you want." But Meghan likes everybody chasing after her. She's, as I pointed out in my book, she is very adept at setting up the situation for people to then chase after her. She sees who she wants to target, but then she sets up the situation for them to chase her. So she's not doing the work. They must do the work. They must court her like she is a goddess, and they are just mere humans. Well, Catherine Cambridge had 2, then 3 very young children at a time that Meghan had nothing to do except create havoc and go around looking for why everybody was prejudiced against her, even though the evidence was to the contrary. But you hear, Meghan was disappointed. So, in other words, Catherine has failed her. You see how subtle and clever they are? But she wasn't losing sleep over it. So, you know, that cow Catherine Cambridge hasn't courted me, but what do I care? Who the hell is she? I mean, the mixed messages and this sort of, you know, if you know anything about psychology, the sleaziness of it all. But then, the coup de grace. Kate felt they didn't have much in common other than the fact that they lived at Kensington Palace. So, in one paragraph, they have managed to securely blame Catherine for the fact that Meghan did not accept her invitation when she said, "The door is open, get in touch." And at the end of it, that Catherine is the one who felt they didn't have much in common, while Meghan felt they had a very great deal in common because they were both outsiders who were marrying into the royal family. So Meghan was going to marry Harry Catherine was going to pay her court. Harry was going to continue to pay Meghan court. And all of a sudden, it was all going to go on around Meg's baby. While Catherine was presumably, if she wasn't a totally inconsiderate cow, going to leave her children with the nanny because, you know, she had to hold Meg's hand. Because Meghan is very adept at playing the I'm so fearful and I'm so vulnerable and I've got such strong feelings and, you know, it's just, you know, I'm so sensitive. At the very same moment that she lets you know that granite would be a very soft version of the softest velvet. I mean, the wild inconsistency. Do you pick it up?
Yes, I see, yes.
You do?
Yes.
On page 159, because of course this book should really have been entitled How to Cast Shade at Everybody at the very moment that you're deifying an adventuress. On page 159 and 160, we have whether everyone in Britain and around the world was equally thrilled or ready for a confident, unapologetically feminist, mixed-race Duchess to occupy a position in the House of Windsor still remained to be seen. However, for the monarchy to truly survive, it must adapt, and rejecting a woman because she was divorced, an actress, or biracial was no longer tenable, despite whatever misgivings certain family members had been whispering privately. Again, these are slugs slithering across the floor, spreading their poison as they go, hoping that nobody will detect how poisonous they're being. Well, the fact of the matter is, Meghan is not unapologetically feminist. Meghan has achieved her success advocating and espousing feminism orally, while at the same time being a very traditional woman thereafter and otherwise. Meghan is no more a feminist than any woman who marries a man for money or for advantage, or who never works and decides that she wants to lunch all day. Because the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and Meghan's greatest successes have all been achieved through men. That, I'm afraid, is not the feminist way. I'm more of a feminist than Meghan. I am. And I don't say that I'm a feminist, but I'm more of a feminist than Meghan. You know, I've earned my money to a large extent. I have been a single mother. I have made it in a very competitive world, and not on my looks, which I could have done, and not on the flat of my back, but I have done it through my endeavors. And I'm not saying I'm a feminist, but so, you know, this rubbish about Meghan being a feminist, I mean, it plays well with the rhetoric, but it's all basically rubbish. Then, of course, they have to get in the mixed race bit. And it would be if they were rejecting her because she was divorced. Well, why would they have rejected her because she was divorced? Mary Christine Kent was divorced, and Prince Michael was allowed to marry her. There's nothing unusual about divorce now. Princess Anne is divorced. Prince Andrew is divorced. Prince Charles is divorced. Camilla is divorced. You know, red herrings everywhere, just stinking up the place. And then we get to the coup de grace again. So they slither it in. An actress. Well, Princess Grace of Monaco was an actress, and she was an outstanding success. And she was often at Buckingham Palace, and she was at all royal events. So I don't really see how being an actress can be held against her. Now we get to the real knife. Or biracial was no longer tenable, despite whatever misgivings certain family members had been whispering privately. So there again is the race card being played. When the fact of the matter is, the one thing that militated in Meghan's favour from the word go was the fact that she was mixed race. Had Meghan Markle not been mixed race, I will bet my bottom dollar that that marriage would not have been allowed. That's the information I have been given from all sorts of people who know what was really going on. So to use her race to say that, and you know that it's so unworthy. It's just dreadful. And now for the last point. On page 160, referring to the Royal Foundation, they say, quoting, "There were several meetings to make sure she was supported in carving out the right role for herself in the family, on empowerment, other issues she cared about, so that she had the right resource support, a courtier shared." In this book, it's so vulgar. Nobody can say they have to share. You know, nobody can go into Cartier and buy a ring. It has to be sourced conflict-free. I mean, so pretentious. An absolute study in vulgarity. I didn't know that actually people spoke like this. Are you aware of people speaking like this in your world?
Yeah, I would say anybody speaks how they want nowadays.
Yeah, I suppose, yes. Anyway, it certainly shows that Meghan was given the support that she needed and that she has subsequently denied having received. And that she was encouraged to pursue the interests that came naturally to her, but that she was supposed to be doing it within the royal parameters. And it gives the lie to the version that Harry, Meghan, scabies, and cowering Durand have promulgated, that somehow all of this has been everybody's fault but Harry and Meghan's. This is their doing. They were given support from the very beginning. If you read this book carefully, it actually at every single turn shoots down every single claim they make. I don't know that the authors were clever enough or so wily that they decide, or maybe they had very little input into this book. And maybe this was really just, you know, the Ministry of Propaganda publishing what Die Führer has decided, because the leader needs to have her point of view conveyed to her adoring public. And I think it's come as a great shock to her. I know, in fact, it has, because I've been told, come as a great shock to her to discover that what she thought was going to be a decorous splash in the sea of celebrity has turned out to be actually a backlash of, my God, is this woman for real? And on that note, I think I will say thank you very much for listening. If you want more, there's more to come. If you don't want more, let me know, and we will go on to other subjects. And please continue with the questions on whatever subject you'd like to hear.
Well, thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, hit the like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.